Hey guys, so in today's video I'm going to continue making the most of my small single garage workshop by getting a handle on materials like lumber and panels, but most importantly I need to do this in a way that would have the smallest amount of impact on the way I use my workshop. As many of you are aware, I am trying to build the ultimate small single garage workshop, and to achieve this goal, multifunctionality or increased functionality coupled with organization needs to be my main consideration when designing my projects. In this case, when I need lumber storage, I need to get a bit creative with the way I'm going to store it. So I'm considering an area that is often overlooked, which is overhead or just underneath the roof. So my idea is taking the conventional wall-mounted arrangement or multi-tier wall-mounted storage unit and shifting it overhead, taking it from a vertical arrangement to a horizontal arrangement. I'll still have the same amount of tiers or potentially even more, so I'll have the same or more storage capacity, but I will be freeing up the wall space. The freed up wall space is then going to be used to build a storage unit for materials that are currently standing on the floor. Things like offcut panels or wood, even steel, tubing, PVC, all these kind of random things that I use in my workshop. The most important objective here is to get it off the floor and stored up against the wall, freeing up the floor to give me maximum usability of my mobile workbenches and trolleys. Up until now I've had lumber laying all over my property, and I really want to get everything stored inside this workshop, which is the motivation behind this design. This project is going to start exactly like a conventional wall-mounted lumber rack with wall-mounted studs, but this time I'm only adding a cantilever at the very top of the stud. I will then space or install additional cantilevers along the width or along the horizontal plane, filling up the entire width of the roof. To install the cantilevers onto the studs, I'm cutting very basic cross-lap joints using my miter saw. It doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to be strong. And for this project I am using fairly inexpensive construction grade lumber that I simply put through my thickness planer. A lot of it is actually offcuts from a different project I did around my house. Now guys, this is not going to be a conventional lumber rack. This is going to be a material storage rack that will incorporate various storage techniques to allow me to store pretty much any material I have in this workshop. Not just long pieces of lumber and panels, but also other things like tubing or steel or threaded rods or dowels and things like that. I want to be able to store pretty much any piece of material that I have in my workshop. So I have to get a little bit creative with these 3 or almost 4 different storage techniques. Right, so at this stage, I know the project looks a lot like my previous lumber rack, but this time I'm only going to be adding cantilevers at the very top. These longer studs are for the wall storage component that I'm going to be adding onto the wall over here. Then the cantilevers at the top, I will mirror across the width of my workshop by adding ones on the other side of the workshop, and then also a beam down the center to add additional cantilevers on there. This will give me storage for my long pieces of lumber, while this wall mounted section will be used to store, well, whatever is standing on the floor here. Now the studs on the opposite end of the workshop is not going to include a wall storage component for panels and stuff like that. It is only going to have the cantilevers, so these studs are much shorter so that I can only support the cantilever up in the roof. Okay guys, so now I have all these short studs installed along the top corner of my workshop over here and the long studs on the other side. As I said, the long studs are for an expansion of the storage system, which is not going to include long pieces of lumber. For the long pieces of lumber, I want to go overhead and I'm going to utilize the corners, these top corners in my roof of my workshop to install cantilevers where I can store long pieces of lumber. And as you can see, I'm going to be utilizing a space in my workshop that hasn't been utilized up until now. Now I'm almost ready to start on the cantilevers, but I think 2 levels or 2 compartments or 2 areas of long lumber storage is not exactly enough. So I'm going to add a beam down the center of the workshop, which will add 2 additional levels of long lumber storage. Originally I wanted to do 2 beams with 4 additional sets of cantilevers, but I think that's going to be a little bit overkill. So a single beam down the middle of the workshop, and that's also going to give me fixing points for some additional lights to, make the workshop a bit better for making videos. Now, to give me a fixing point at the back of the workshop for the beams I want to run down the center, I need to install a cross brace at the back, right behind or right in front of the garage door. And to this beam, I'm going to install cheap or inexpensive OSB panels to prevent the lumber that I slide onto the cantilevers from damaging the door itself. So for the center beam, I'm going to use the exact same technique to cut in the joints using my miter saw. It's not pretty, but I mean, it does the job, it works, and it is fairly strong. Okay, so this is the beam I'm going to be installing down the center of the workshop, pretty much prepped and ready to be installed. But before I do, I'm going to install the cantilevers. Now for these cantilevers, I'm going to cut a joint in the center so that it sits flush with the top of the beam. And I'm also going to taper them towards the outside because I think this is going to look a bit neater, and it's also going to give me an angled surface that I can potentially attach lights to or things like that. Right, so normally to cut tapers I would use a jig on my table saw, but it's going to be a bit slow, so this time I opted for my miter saw, which might be a bit quicker because I've got quite a few to cut. Now this very basic jig transfers the cross-cut fence on the miter saw to a parallel fence, I guess you can call it, and I've got clamps to secure the stock because it's obviously going to be quite narrow, and hopefully this will prevent kickback. We're going to see how it works. Now these toggle latches or hold down latches are actually very versatile. I use them a lot in my workshop, so I'm going to add them to my Amazon storefront, and I will drop the link down below if you guys want to check out pricing and availability. So that's pretty much the beam down the center of the workshop. Now, if you look at the spacing of the garage or the width of the garage, if I went with the 2-beam option, I would have dramatically increased my storage capacity or capability, but I think it will be a bit overkill. The center beam with the cantilevers on the walls, I think is going to be more than sufficient for my requirements. Now, the center beam is currently just fixed at the 2 ends, but it seems quite stable. If I start putting lumber on it and I notice that it's bending or struggling to handle the load, there is additional fixing points or support points I can exploit to stiffen up the beam. So that's pretty much it for the first component of my 3-component storage system or material storage system, which is the cantilevers for the long lumber storage. Now moving this from the wall to the overhead now frees up the wall, which will allow me to build the second component, which is going to be a storage system for my panels and offcuts. For the second component, I'm going to be very simple, or it's going to be very straightforward. I'm going to add a shelf on the underside of the studs that will allow me to stack everything on the floor, on top of the shelf, and in between the studs. For the longer pieces, they will hopefully be able to slide in behind the long lumber, which will be on the cantilevers. From there, I can use the space between the studs to implement a basic organization system where I group certain offcuts or panels together. To add an extra degree of safety, I'm also going to add a bungee cord or a chain that can be easily engaged or disengaged when I want to add or remove stock from the storage system.
Along with the hold down or toggle latches, I'll also add the Fisher Duo plugs, which I use because this is a hollow cement brick wall, and these plugs actually do a fantastic job at securing anything to a hollow wall. I will add those. I will also add the bungee cord, and I will add the eye bolts to my Amazon storefront. Guys, if you want to build something along these lines, check it out there. You will be supporting the channel, and I genuinely appreciate it.
Right, so that's the second component to my material storage system for my small workshop, which is the offcut panel and offcut wood storage compartments. Next, I'm going to focus on the third storage component, which is going to allow me to store things like this, T-track, tubing, stuff like this, or threaded rod, things I don't generally use a lot of in my workshop. So building a dedicated storage system for it doesn't really make sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a rainwater gutter on the underside of the shelf, which will allow me to pop all those things in there. I have visible access to it, and it is stored.
Now the gutter option is not really a organization system, it's a storage system. So it's for things I don't really use a lot in my workshop that I can just dump in there, and on the odd occasion that I need something that is stored there, I can sift through it to find whatever I'm looking for. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just really needs to be a place where I can drop things.
Right, so that's the three main components of my small workshop material storage unit. Long lumber or long pieces of material, off-cut lumber, and then off-cut pieces of material like tubing. Now I know some of you guys are probably thinking this PVC gutter is probably going to fill with dust very quickly, and that is probably going to be the case. So at some stage I'll maybe just put a little Perspex lid over here, just a hinge over there and a piece of Perspex that can cover the gutter, and I can just open it when I put something in. But for now, because I don't have material, I'm just going to vacuum it out from time to time as it is necessary. Now there is a fourth component to this storage unit, to my material storage unit, but I will cover that in a moment. First I want to get all the stuff off the floor and in the rack so it is stored and I can finally have a bit of freedom to move around in my own workshop.
Now guys, as I said, this is not really a organization system, this is a storage system. I don't have the luxury to organize all the large variety of materials I use in my workshop because it is a single garage workshop. So I would rather store everything together, and when I want to use it, unfortunately I have to sift through it to find the piece of material I want to use.
And that's pretty much it for my material storage system or my material storage rack. It doesn't do a great job as an organization system, but it does a fantastic job as a storage system. And it frees up the floor for me to use my mobile benches in this space. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is a fourth component to this storage system, which is the full sheet storage. Now, I don't really have a lot of full sheets in my workshop, but when I do, I have calculated this space or allowed just enough space for a full sheet to move in at an angle and then sit behind this lip on the gutter over here, preventing it from falling over. So it can pretty much sit right against the wall. I don't really want anything on the floor, but when I have a full sheet in here, I'll be able to store it up against the wall here and it will not take up too much space. Overall, I'm quite pleased with the results. I've got a lot of material stored up here and it is in no way restricting my ability to move or use my workshop. Maybe I should have done the 2-beam option because it would have been nice to have a bit of additional storage capacity, because currently I am at capacity, but it's not going to be too much work to add an additional beam later on if I need to. For now, I'm happy with the project and it does exactly what I intended it to do. But that's pretty much it for this video. It's maybe not the most exciting project, but I think I've gotten one step closer to building the ultimate small single garage workshop, because now I have all my material off the floor and I can focus on my mobile benches and workstations. Now, if you aren't subscribed yet and you want to see how I build out this small workshop, you should do that now. But that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a bit of a slow start to the year, but I've got some really fun projects planned for the very near future. So I'm going to try and get them out to you guys as soon as possible. As always, as I said, thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Till next time. Cheers.